Hello and welcome to Brightsmith's Women in Mobility series. Today I'm joined by Yasmine Fage. She is the co-founder and COO of Goggo Network. She is currently in Madrid and manages the company, which is in multiple locations from there. So over to you, Yasmine. Do you want to tell us a bit about Goggo, about yourself, and what it is that you do?
Great, thanks, Jenny. Yes, so sure. So about Gogo, so Gogo is a company that is focused on autonomous mobility, and so we are focused on autonomous mobility in Europe. A lot of the effort right now is going on in Asia and in the US, but few in Europe. And so we want to be, and we are starting to be the first AV mobility operator. And we're also working with governments to shape actually the regulation that will be needed to actually operate fleet at scale. About me, before co-founding Gogo, I was an associate partner in the New York office of McKinsey, where I work in innovation and public sector, so a lot of heavily regulated industry. And before that, I worked in investment banking in London, actually. And yes, and the team is split between Paris, Berlin, and Madrid. So the company is headquartered in Berlin, but we do a lot of work in France, and we also have a strong team in Spain.
Wonderful. And how did you get into mobility? What was it that kind of made you realize that's the direction that you wanted to go in?
Yeah, good question. So I would say I always love to work at the cross intersection between corporates and public sector. So anything that can impact society. And actually, when I work at McKinsey, I didn't work only in mobility. I work also a lot in healthcare. But I see the same kind of fundamentals and dynamic that basically the way people move is not just impacting P&L, is actually impacting the daily life of people. So I thought it's fascinating, and I think it's going to be changing a lot. It already has changed a lot in the last 5 years, but it's a real revolution underway. And serendipity, one of my previous teachers from Columbia University when I did my MBA there, thought about the idea of Goggo Network, and he offered me to join him. And so, yeah, that's how it started.
Brilliant. We've talked about this before, but one of the things when we first met, we discussed was why we need more female voices, particularly entrepreneurial female voices in the sector, and what impact that would make. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, no, I think the automotive, the traditional automotive sector is so man-driven, and the mobility space, I think, is a bit better, but it's still, I would say, still dominated by men. I mean, why I'm not a feminist and pro-woman like crazy, but I just think that in general, balance is good, and that women bring different perspective. And so any industry, I think you should get both sex involved to get the best answers to any problems. And so I really encourage women to join this sector, because now it's much more than just about a car. It's about transportation as a service, and it's much more about the whole end-to-end process of moving people and goods than just a gadget that is very exciting and that had much more appeal to men than to women. But yeah.
Great. And I know it's a sector that you kind of explained why you moved into it, but one that it seems like you love working in. When you were telling me some of the ideas and the things that you're working on, it seems like something that you're very passionate about. What is it about the sector specifically that you really enjoy, and what sort of difference do you feel like you're making in that sector?
No, I mean, I think first, it's an interesting problem to crack, because I think the way people move today is not, I mean, rationally, if you look at these huge boxes of metals filled with maybe one person that pollute, it's just I don't know how we got there, because it's totally inefficient and it makes no sense. And so I think it's just challenging to say, okay, we got there, but now how do we, bring back, and what do we need to change to actually make it a much more fluid and logical system, so that people can actually enjoy traveling and travel when it makes sense. And is it by sharing? Is it by not driving? Is it by, being electric, of course? So this is all the different variables that hopefully are gonna, solve this problem for like a better lifestyle for people, and hopefully also a better like, environment and society as a whole, and also the architecture and the harmony that you can have in a city. So I think that's why it's fascinating, because I think it's a very hard problem. Like we know that like, yeah, we would love to have people only sharing, or we would love to be only electric, or we would love to, but like, it's actually like there are a lot of dependencies and interconnection with public sector. How do you integrate? What does it mean we've seen with every time there is a crisis in a transportation strike or something, it just paralyzes the country. So it's like, it's really the nerve of society. And it's just like, I think it's, for me, I love like the challenge of solving it, and I hope the impact you can have if you manage to make a difference.
Well, I certainly think that's something that you'll be able to do.
We'll try.
I guess yours is actually a perfect example of a company that lots of the things are still to come, because it's so early on in where you're at, and also the infrastructure supporting that. So kind of what exciting opportunities are ahead for you and the business and the surrounding infrastructure?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think we've all like now realized that the dream of the robo taxi going everywhere, at 100 kilometers per hour is not for today. But what we're seeing is that there are a lot of use cases that actually can solve like other problems that are very helpful, like logistic use cases with autonomous driving, or high or dedicated lane for high speed transit buses. So right now we're actually working closely with public transport operators in France, in Spain, to develop those corridors. And we're also working with the international company to actually promote a better way of like solving the last mile delivery with AV.
And my final question is, the next generation looking to move into mobility, what would your advice be for them? How can they make that leap into the sector?
Sure, good question. I mean, I would say if you feel like you want to try to solve one of the problem or of this big problem that we discussed from the beginning, there are so many ways you can be an engineer in, mechanical engineer, a software engineer. You can work in the business side. You can work with regulators. There's no limit to what you can do, because it's actually one of the biggest problem, I think, of the next generation. But I would say just, look for something that you feel passionate about, and use the skills, the generic skills that you had from studying to that field. And yeah, I mean, like, I'm happy to help in any way I can, but I think that, like, look at cool companies that you like and reach out, and feel free to ask for advice. I think it's a very neat community, and there are many options, and we need a lot of talent. So
brilliant. And I think that is something that's been echoed throughout this series, is that go out and ask. And I would say from first-hand experience, I did that when I joined the sector, and everyone is very supportive and very welcoming and very keen to give advice. So thank you.
of course.
Thank you for being a part of the series. And it's been an interesting recording process, but I'm hoping people then
God, yes.
where we have a small gap.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been great chatting to you, and thank you for giving us an insight into your world, what you do, and for sharing those thoughts for people to take some insights from in their career choices.
Perfect, fantastic. Thank you for the interview, and happy to help in any way.
Brilliant. Cheers. Thanks, Yasmine. Bye-bye.
Bye.